The sun had barely set on the distant planet, casting an eerie orange hue across the rocky landscape. Lena, along with a group of brave human colonists, was on a routine mission to survey the planet's resources. Everything had been going smoothly until the moment the sky above them darkened and strange, unfamiliar ships descended from the heavens. The first indication of danger came in the form of a deafening screech that echoed through the air. Lena's heart raced as she quickly signaled her team to prepare for the worst. Before they could react, the alien ships unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, disabling their equipment and forcing them to crash land on the barren surface. In the blink of an eye, armed alien soldiers swarmed the wreckage, their cold, expressionless faces hidden behind high-tech helmets. The aliens were known for their ruthless tactics, and their reputation had spread across galaxies. They were feared for their brutal efficiency, and now they were targeting the humans who had dared enter their territory. Lena felt a chill run down her spine as she surveyed the scene. Her teammates tried to fight back, but they were overpowered in seconds. There was no escape. It wasn't just about survival now. They were being hunted, captured, and taken for reasons unknown. Lena struggled to maintain her composure. She had seen battles before, had faced death in many forms, but never like this. The aliens were different. They were calculating, precise, and efficient. No sooner had they surrounded the humans than they began pulling them away one by one. Lena was among the last to be captured. She had no choice but to surrender. Resisting only meant suffering. The aliens didn't need to waste energy on pointless brutality if they could break their prisoners quickly. But the one thing Lena didn't understand was why they wanted her. Her skills were valuable, yes, but she wasn't the leader of their mission. Why her? As she was dragged away, her mind raced with questions. The aliens spoke in a language she couldn't understand, their voices harsh and mechanical. Every step felt heavier than the last. She tried to break free, but the grip of the aliens was unyielding, their strength unmatched by anything she had ever encountered. It wasn't long before they reached their ship, a massive, dark structure that seemed to swallow the very light around it. The cold, metallic doors opened, revealing a sterile, unsettling interior. The walls were lined with strange, unfamiliar technology that pulsed with an eerie glow. The air smelled sterile, as if every trace of life had been erased long ago. The aliens didn't speak, but their actions spoke volumes. They placed Lena in a containment cell that was unlike any prison she had ever seen. It was a transparent cube, not designed to hold prisoners, but to keep them on display. There was no bed, no comfort, only the cold floor beneath her feet. She could see other prisoners in similar cells, their eyes filled with fear and confusion. Some of them were already bruised and bloodied, evidence of the aliens' previous tactics. Lena didn't know if they were alive or if they had been tortured to the point of death. The silence of the ship was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery. Hours passed, though it felt like days. Lena's body ached, her mind exhausted from the constant adrenaline. She knew she had to stay alert. The aliens hadn't killed anyone yet, but she had a sinking feeling that their plans were far worse than death. What was their goal? Why capture humans at all? Lena's mind kept racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. She had heard rumors of other races using prisoners for genetic experiments or to gain information. But these aliens didn't seem to care about interrogation or negotiation. They were methodical, cold, and precise. They only cared about one thing: control. Suddenly, the silence of her cell was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Lena's heart began to pound as the sound grew louder. She tried to steady her breath, pushing aside the wave of panic threatening to take over. The door to her cell opened with a soft hiss, and a figure stepped inside. It wasn't one of the guards. This alien was different. His appearance was more refined, his movements smoother. He wore a black uniform that distinguished him from the others, and his helmet was sleek and unadorned, with no visible signs of emotion. Lena's instincts screamed at her to remain calm, but her body betrayed her as a wave of fear surged through her. The alien approached her slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. It was as if he could sense her fear, and that only made her more anxious. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he studied her, examining her every movement. Lena could feel the weight of his scrutiny, and for a moment, she felt small under his intense stare. But she refused to back down. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the alien spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You will break," he said, his words cold and full of certainty. "You are weak, just like the others. We will extract what we need from you." The words stung, but Lena refused to show fear. She clenched her fists at her sides, steeling herself for whatever would come next. She was stronger than they realized. They didn't understand the power of human resilience. They didn't know the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. The alien didn't wait for a response. He motioned for the guards to move in, and they began to drag her from her cell. As she was pulled away, Lena's mind flashed back to her comrades. She had to survive this. For them. For humanity. She had no idea what the aliens wanted from her, but she wouldn't give up without a fight. She had survived worse, and she would survive this. The last thing she saw before being taken to the unknown depths of the alien ship was the look on the faces of the other prisoners. They were watching her, some with hope, others with resignation. It was then that she realized something. They weren't just prisoners. They were survivors. And as long as they had the will to survive, they weren't truly defeated. The cold metallic chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the alien technology that surrounded Lena. She had been dragged through dark corridors, her limbs aching with every step, until they brought her to a room unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were lined with strange glowing panels, casting an eerie light across the cold floor. There was no furniture, no comfort. Just dark, unforgiving emptiness. The only thing that stood in the middle of the room was a chair. Not just any chair, it was a device designed for one purpose, to break a person's mind and body. Lena's heart raced as she was forced into the chair, her arms and legs strapped down with unyielding restraints. She had no choice but to face whatever they had planned for her. She had survived battles before, but this was different. The alien captors showed no emotion, no pity. They moved with precision, as if this was just another routine task for them. To them, she was nothing more than a specimen to be studied, a tool to be used. She was a human, and they had no intention of letting her go. The alien who had spoken to her earlier, the one in the black uniform, stood before her. His eyes were cold, unreadable, as he observed her every move. He did not speak at first, simply watching as the guards attached strange devices to her head, her chest, and her limbs. The air around Lena seemed to grow heavier, the silence suffocating. She couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of dread. What were they going to do to her? The thought kept racing through her mind as she tried to remain calm, tried to summon the strength to fight whatever they had planned. The alien finally spoke, his voice low and harsh. "You are weak. All humans are weak. You will break, and when you do, we will know everything we need to know." His words sent a chill through Lena's body, but she refused to show fear. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She had been through hardships before, and she could survive this. Then, the pain began. It started as a low buzz in her chest, a feeling of discomfort that quickly turned into something far worse. It was as if her very bones were being pulled apart from the inside. Lena gasped, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts as the sensation intensified. The device attached to her chest pulsed with a harsh energy that shot through her body like lightning. She clenched her teeth, her fists tightening against the restraints as the pain grew unbearable. The alien watched her with a cold gaze, his expression unchanged. "This is just the beginning," he said, as if it were a statement of fact rather than a threat. The device on her chest hummed louder, sending another wave of searing pain through her body. Lena's vision blurred as her muscles trembled under the strain. Every nerve felt as if it were on fire. It was as though the very essence of her being was being torn apart, but Lena refused to scream. She had learned long ago that showing weakness was the enemy's victory. She would not give them that satisfaction. She fought the pain, focusing on each breath, each second that passed. She would endure. She had to. The alien's voice broke through the haze of pain. "You are resilient," he said, almost in a tone of amusement. "But it will not be enough. We have ways of breaking even the strongest of minds." Lena's vision swam, and her head felt heavy. The edges of her thoughts began to blur as the pain continued to intensify. She could feel her heart racing, her pulse pounding in her ears. She tried to block it out, but the agony was all-encompassing. It was a torment unlike anything she had ever experienced. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the pain stopped. Lena's body sagged in the chair, drenched in sweat and barely able to keep her eyes open. She gasped for air, trying to steady her breathing, but her body was shaking uncontrollably. The alien didn't give her a moment to recover. He stepped forward, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. "This is the first stage," he said, his voice low. "It is meant to test your limits, but we have more in store for you. Do you understand?" Lena didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too weak, too consumed by the lingering pain that still pulsed through her body. But her mind, her spirit, remained unbroken. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. The alien stepped back, nodding to the guards. They moved quickly, adjusting the devices on her body. Lena felt something new being attached to her head, cold metal against her skin, tightening around her temples. Then, without warning, a sharp electrical pulse shot through her skull. Her body jerked violently in the chair, her back arching against the restraints. The pain in her head was excruciating, as if every thought was being ripped from her mind. She could feel her own brain frying, the electrical currents zapping through her nerves, disrupting everything. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she couldn't see anything at all. All she could feel was the agony, the overwhelming, suffocating pain that seemed to stretch on forever. Lena tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat was dry, her voice lost in the chaos of pain. The world around her spun, and she couldn't tell where she ended and the torment began. Her mind was slipping, fraying at the edges as the pain continued to assault her. It was as though she were being torn apart from the inside, her very soul being wrenched from her body. But still, Lena fought to hold on. She wouldn't break. She couldn't. The electrical pulse finally stopped, leaving Lena breathless and disoriented. Her mind felt fuzzy, her thoughts scattered. She could barely focus, the pain still lingering in the background like a constant hum. Her body was exhausted, every muscle aching from the strain, but she clung to the one thing she still had: her will to survive. The alien stepped forward again, observing her with cold detachment. "You are strong, but not strong enough," he said, his voice like ice. "Soon, you will give us what we want. All humans do." He turned to leave, but not before one last, chilling statement: "The worst is yet to come." Lena's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let the fear take over. She had been pushed to the brink before. She could survive this. She had TO.AS. The door to the chamber slid shut behind the alien. Lena was left in darkness, alone with her pain. But in the depths of her suffering, something stirred inside her. A spark of defiance, a fire that refused to die. The aliens could try to break her, but they would soon learn that humans were far stronger than they realized. The silence after the torture was almost worse than the pain itself. Lena lay still in the cold chair, her body barely responding, her mind drifting between moments of reality and fading memories. The machines had finally stopped humming, and the bright lights above her dimmed, but the damage had already been done. Every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion, every nerve still pulsed with the aftershock of the pain that had ripped through her again and again. Her lips were dry, her eyes unable to fully open, and yet deep within her, something fierce remained alive. The aliens thought they had broken her, that their brutal methods would crush her spirit, but they had only carved out the surface. Inside, beneath the bruises and blood, her determination burned hotter than ever. As the guards entered the room again, she didn't move, but she listened. Their language was harsh, unfamiliar, but she could feel the shift in their tone. There was tension, worry, maybe even fear. One of them approached cautiously, scanning her body with a device, then muttering something quickly to the others. She didn't know what they said, but their voices were not filled with pride or triumph. Something had gone wrong. something they didn't expect. They unstrapped her and carried her like a broken object, but they didn't know she was still watching, still feeling, still remembering everything. They threw her into a small, dark cell with no light, no comfort, and left her there without a word. She lay still, barely able to breathe, and yet her mind kept spinning. Why had they stopped? Why were they suddenly unsure? She thought back to the pain, to the devices they used, and something strange stirred in her memory, a moment during the torture when everything went silent, not just around her, but inside her mind. There was a sudden stillness, like the world paused, and then something pushed back. A pulse, not from the machines, but from her own body. At the time, she was too far gone to understand it, but now, lying in the dark, she wondered what had happened. Could something inside her have reacted to their technology? Could her body have done something even they didn't understand? The air in the cell was thick and stale, and every breath felt like lifting a mountain, but her thoughts kept her alive. They thought she was finished, but she was changing, evolving in the silence. Hours passed, or maybe days' time had no meaning here, but Lena began to feel something strange. The pain in her limbs faded faster than it should have. The burns on her skin, the deep wounds from their experiments, they were healing. She could feel her strength returning, not slowly, but rapidly, unnaturally. Her fingers twitched, then her hands curled into fists. Her legs, which had refused to move, now responded when she commanded them. Whatever they had done to her had not broken her, it had triggered something hidden inside her. A memory surfaced from before the capture. During one of her early missions, a military doctor had mentioned a classified project, something to do with human resilience and adaptive biology, a project she had unknowingly volunteered for. She had dismissed it at the time, thinking it was just another injection, another routine scan. But now, in the darkness of the alien cell, she realized it might have saved her life. Whatever they did to her, whatever they injected or activated during the torture, it had caused her body to awaken. She was no longer the same woman they captured. She was stronger, faster, something new. And the aliens, with all their intelligence and power, had no idea what they had just unleashed. As her body healed, her thoughts became clearer. She remembered every hallway they dragged her through, every face of the guards who hurt her, every sound of the machines that tore into her. And she made a silent promise not of revenge, but of survival. She would escape. She would make them understand what a mistake they had made. But more than that, she would return to Earth, to warn them, to prepare them for what was out here. She was not the same Lena who had been captured. She had died in that chair, but something far more dangerous had taken her place. The aliens would soon learn that the real torture was not what they did to her, but what they awakened by doing it. And when she rose, fully healed, fully changed, there would be no one left to stop her. Lena stood in the darkness of the cell, her breathing steady, her eyes slowly adjusting to the black silence that surrounded her. But the silence didn't frighten her anymore. In fact, it was the first time she felt fully in control since her capture, because deep inside her body, something had awakened, something powerful and unknown. The bruises that had once covered her skin were gone, her wounds closed without a trace, and she could feel every muscle in her body vibrating with strange energy, like her blood was alive with fire, her senses sharper, her thoughts faster, her instincts stronger. She could hear footsteps far down the hallway, soft, careful but no longer threatening, because now she was no longer prey. The walls around her didn't feel like a prison anymore. They felt like paper waiting to be torn apart. She placed her hand against the cold metal and felt a small hum in her fingertips. And without thinking, she focused on that feeling, and then the impossible happened. The metal began to bend. It was slow at first, just a small dent, but then it shifted more, like it was responding to her command, and for the first time since her capture, Lena smiled. Whatever the aliens had done to her body during the torture, whatever experiments they had used to break her, had instead unlocked a hidden part of her, maybe something in her DNA. Lena moved before they could react. She was faster than she thought possible, her body a blur, and in seconds, 3 guards were on the floor, their weapons scattered. She didn't kill them, something inside her still held back, but they wouldn't wake up soon. She took one of the weapons, a sleek alien rifle, and felt it pulse in her hand, but it didn't scare her. She ran through the corridors, each step echoing, her bare feet silent, her mind remembering every corner and turn from her earlier trips through this place when she was still a prisoner. Now, she was a storm moving through their station. As she passed a glass panel, she caught a reflection of herself, and even that was different. Her eyes glowed faintly, her skin clearer, tighter, stronger, like her entire body had been rewritten into something new. She didn't know how long the transformation would last, or if this was her forever now, but there was no time to question it. As more aliens approached, she didn't stop. She used her speed and strange new strength, dodging blasts of energy, disabling her enemies with precise, powerful strikes. Doors that once needed codes or guards now bent open at her touch. The scientists who had tortured her fled in panic when they saw her, shouting warnings into their comms, calling for security, but she kept moving forward. Her goal wasn't revenge, it was escape. She needed to get off this ship, find a way back to Earth, and tell humanity what had happened. But deep down, a part of her wondered if she was still human at all. Something inside her felt more connected to this strange technology than before, like she could feel the power in the walls, like the systems were reacting to her presence. She entered a control room and placed her hand on a glowing panel, just to see what would happen, and instantly, screens lit up, data flashing in front of her eyes. She didn't understand the language, but somehow, the meaning came to her mind, as if the ship was translating for her. She saw maps, navigation routes, logs of her capture, videos of her torture, and files marked with alien symbols she somehow understood meant experiment successful. Her heart pounded. They had known this might happen. They had wanted to create something like her. She wasn't a mistake. She was a result. They had pushed too far, played with forces they couldn't control, and now their creation had broken free. The door behind her opened again, and a tall figure entered, a commander, more advanced than the others, covered in armor, its eyes glowing blue. It didn't raise a weapon, just looked at her and said in slow, broken English, "We didn't want this. But now we must end it." Lena didn't answer. She stepped forward, feeling her body react again, the strange energy in her blood rising to the surface, and the moment the alien moved, she exploded into action. The fight was brutal. This one was fast, skilled, but she was faster. They moved like two storms colliding, shaking the walls, crashing into machines, sparks flying with every hit. It was not just strength she had, it was instinct, speed, something more. And when it was over, the alien lay still, and Lena stood breathing heavily, surrounded by the wreckage. She looked at the path ahead and knew it was time. She found a shuttle bay, broke into a small ship, and launched into space. As the stars filled her view, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Earth was far, but not out of reach. She had survived what no one was supposed to survive. She had become what no one expected. And now, the galaxy would learn a new truth. Humans were not weak, not primitive. They were dangerous. And if others ever dared to do what these aliens had done to her, they would face the same awakening, the same unstoppable force that had just been born inside her. The command chamber of the alien flagship was quiet now, the silence heavy like a storm waiting to strike, and every officer inside knew. Something had gone horribly wrong, but they could not admit it out loud, not even to themselves, because doing so meant accepting the truth that they had awakened a nightmare with their own hands. The supreme strategist of the Threx Dominion stared at the flickering holograms, showing pieces of data that made no sense. Security feeds with static, guards lying unconscious in twisted positions, and a single human form moving like a ghost through the corridors, untouched by their weapons, unafraid of their power. She had escaped. Lena had not only survived the impossible, she had broken their systems, defeated their warriors, and stolen one of their own ships. They had captured a weak, broken human woman, but what had left their ship was not weak and not broken. What had left was something beyond them. At first, the Threx scientists had celebrated. They believed the pain, the experiments, the transformation, they believed it would give them control, a new weapon to use against humanity. They had planned to break her spirit and mold her into a tool. But something in her mind refused to die, something so deeply human that they hadn't accounted for it. Her will. Her fury. her silent defiance. And now, as word spread across Threx colonies, as military outposts went dark without warning, and as scout ships vanished near the edges of human space, they began to understand that their mistake had consequences beyond imagination. Lena wasn't hiding. She was coming back. Reports of a single fighter vessel tearing through patrols, destroying laboratories, and freeing prisoners had reached the High Circle, and the name whispered in terror was always the same: the returned. The aliens who had once laughed at humans now held meetings in fear. They studied her image, replayed her escape, tried to understand how a fragile human body had changed into something that made no sense. Their best minds suggested her DNA had fused with unknown energy from their machines, that her mind had adapted to their tech, and that her body had learned how to bend the physical rules of their biology. But all those theories meant nothing now, because the question was no longer how the question was, what will she do next? And that question burned through every level of their empire. Some wanted to surrender, some wanted to flee, and others foolishly planned a second capture. But those who had seen her eyes on the security footage, those who heard her voice whisper through hijacked communications, they knew the truth. Lena wasn't interested in peace or vengeance. She was on a mission. She was unmaking them piece by piece. In her stolen ship, Lena flew silently across space, her face calm but her heart never forgetting the pain. Every planet she approached, every outpost she found, she left a message. Not words, not violence, just the sight of their fallen pride, their broken walls, and their empty labs where prisoners had once screamed. She wasn't killing them unless they stood in her way, but she was showing them exactly what she had become and what they had created. Somewhere inside her, the pain of torture still burned, but it no longer controlled her. It fueled her. She had become something more, not a monster, not a hero, but a force of balance. A reminder to all species who thought of humans as weak prey. She never asked for this power. She never wanted it. But now that it was hers, she would use it not for revenge, but for warning. She would make them regret every scream she gave them, not with hate, but with something far worse. With justice. One day, deep in the Threx capital, where no enemy had ever reached, the sky turned dark. One ship, glowing with energy no Threx had ever seen before, entered orbit. The defense systems froze. The leaders watched from high towers as the impossible happened. The ship landed. Alone, Lena stepped out, no army, no weapons. Just her. And they didn't move. They didn't fire. Because regret had already filled every part of their souls. She looked at them, silent and still, her presence louder than any speech. They remembered what they had done. They remembered the screams. And now they saw the result. She said only one thing, her voice like thunder in the silence. This is your last warning. Never touch another human again. Then she turned, boarded her ship, and left without a shot fired. But the message had been sent. Across the galaxy, the Threx shut down their human programs, closed their labs, and withdrew from every part of human space. No treaties were signed, no peace deals written, but they never returned. And to the humans who heard the story later, who learned about the woman who came back from death and made an empire bow, they gave her a name not of fear, but of respect. Not a victim, not a soldier, but the one who made the galaxy understand what it meant to torture a human and live long enough to regret it.